Once you become an owner of a team, you get so much more into the sport and you can't help it. So I really love NFL football now to the degree of following it much more than I did previously. What people don't realize is the human body and the brain are so well designed to do, by millions of years of evolution, what we do. As always, space remains an unforgiving frontier, and the skies overhead will surely present obstacles and setbacks that must be overcome. But hard challenges demand fresh approaches, and I'm optimistic that Stratolaunch will yield transformative benefits, not only for scientists and space entrepreneurs, but for all of us. While I sign off on trades or free agents, I've rarely overruled my basketball people's decisions. But I'm not shy about steering the discussion or pushing deeper if something doesn't make sense to me. That darn luxury tax is pretty painful. I was only in second grade when the Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. The night of his launch, April 12, 1961, I went out onto the front porch and stared up at the stars, trying to see his capsule passing overhead. Like millions of others, I was enthralled by the idea of space exploration and have been ever since. The brain is the most complex, challenging scientific puzzle we have ever tried to decode. The NFL, as compared to the NBA, it's so physical and so emotional almost every play. I remember having pizza at Shakey's in Vancouver, Washington in 1973 and talking about the fact that eventually, everyone is going to be online and have access to newspapers and stuff, and wouldn't people be willing to pay for information on a computer terminal? The definition of the good life is doing creative things, whether making music, trying to figure out how to do a particular piece of code, or putting together investments. Nobody really knows what it would take to create something that is self-aware or has a personality. I guess I could imagine a day when perhaps, if we can understand how it works in the human brain, which is unbelievably complicated, it could be possible. I was the center on our fraternity team, but I was a center eligible, so I was known for my ability to go out, and I was pretty sure-handed catching a pass in the flat about 10 yards down the field. My father played high school football and was pretty good. He also played center, so I always relished the idea that we both ended up playing center. Long periods can pass between the times you play for a championship, so you have to savor those moments. Microprocessors were instantly attractive to us because you could build something for a fraction of the cost of conventional electronics. That's essentially what we did with the Trafo Data computer, only it was too narrow and challenging an area to try to build a service business in. Anybody doing philanthropy has to find something that appeals to them from their own personal background or from intellectual curiosity. The brain has this amazing level of almost fractal complexity to it. When you start looking at any part of it in detail, you realize that it's much more complex than you thought. I'm trying to transmit the visions of creativity and build institutions that are incredibly catalytic to their fields. We taught ourselves to simulate how microprocessors work using DEC computers so we could develop software even before our machine was built. In order to be truly intelligent, computers must understand, that is probably the critical word. I think few people in their lifetime have the chance to be involved in something like the creation of Microsoft. That's always going to be something I'm known for. We know a certain amount about neurons. You can do fMRI and watch parts of the brain light up. But what happens in the middle is poorly understood. No one knows the complete function of sleep. Is it to reset the brain or give it more of a rest period? Is it for cleaning the brain of all the garbage protein? For me, talking about these things as a non-biologist is fascinating. I first got interested in the brain through computers. The brain is one of the richest green fields of science. There's so much yet to be discovered. Back to Microsoft days, I'm always looking for, okay, that's great, but what can go wrong? Go Seahawks! Go Blazers! Sports is such a cyclical thing, it's often feast or famine. But what you try and do as an owner is build a winning organization. It's part of the juice of sports that you tend to find certain sports figures that you cheer on from other cities and others that you're a bit skeptical about. Even though Trafo Data wasn't a roaring success, it was seminal in preparing us to make Microsoft's first product a couple of years later. If you have an analytical bent like I do, going back to my days as a programmer, you like to ask questions. You have a certain number of dreams in your life you want to fulfill. My mother, God bless her, forced me to take touch typing when I was 16. In Portland, I am more involved in the details of trade discussions because I've been around at sport longer and can watch tape and can give some input to the drafting process. In football, not at all. It's so specialized. It's always interesting to bring scientists together, because they typically have very polarized views. I just try to stuff my brain with everything that I can read on what is going on in science at a very high level, and sometimes I see connections of what might need to be done. Your dream, when you buy a sports franchise, is to win the championship, the Super Bowl. I am generally fascinated by what are the big, challenging questions, that's behind my curiosity. Anytime you get to compete for the championship in a professional spot, it's just a magic thing. There's a long history of artificial intelligence programs that try to mimic what the brain is doing, but they've all fallen short. I think, as an owner, you really want to do the team right, the fans right, and the community right and build a winning organization. The Ebola virus is unlike any health crisis we have ever experienced and needs a response unlike anything we have ever seen. Some people are great at the pure mathematical things, like Bill Gates, he's great at math things. He loves to do puzzles. Me, I like to look at an overall landscape and try to figure out, how do you solve a problem? It's very challenging to carve back market share. I'm trying to show people that they can activate their own passions and find their own path. I've lived in Boston. Something that is characteristic of me is the breadth of my interests. I'm not somebody that just has one or two things in life that are laser-like focused. The thing is, once you're in the Super Bowl, you want to win. As time goes on, you want to win more and more. If you have the chance to realize some of these dreams you had as a kid, and you have the opportunity, why not pursue that? I grew up watching games with my father at Washington Husky Stadium. When I moved out to Seattle, I had a friend who would take me to Seahawks games in the 1980s. At one point, I was the youngest owner in Major League sports. Somehow, I knew you had to have perfect eyesight to be a test pilot, and so that was it for my astronaut career. You want someone who will challenge you back. Sometimes, that's the way the best decisions get made.